morning. It's Saturday story time, and I wanted to show you my bluebells. They're just about done blooming. They're not as blue as they were, and I'm hoping there's a bit of a breeze. I'm hoping the camera doesn't pick up the breeze too badly, and we will begin our story. Remember, we had bought an old deserted building because we were moving back to where my folks lived and my mother needed us at that time. And I'm going to read a little bit from my journal, and the month is September 1985 when I wrote this. Actually, what I'm reading about no doubt happened in August that year. And it talks about life on our corner of town has been very different from our former life. And then it goes on our corner, we watch the bikers travel from coast to coast on the Bicentennial Bike Trail. In July, we had an 18-year-old boy stop at our corner. It was a night that threatened thunderstorm, the strong winds picking up the loose litter, sand and dust flinging it up into the dark, moody sky. David was tired, lonely, hungry, and frightened. We took him into our home and fed and bedded him. And he took us on his trip day by day as he spread out his maps on our dinner table. And the next morning, in clear blue skies, we waved David goodbye as he pedaled out of our lives on the corner. Then there was Pat, a bicyclist I met in the park on the other corner of town while I sold pie for the Chamber of Commerce. Listening to his adventures, we sat together eating pie under the shade of trees. Somewhere in the Midwest, he may be reminded of this day of his trip as he looks at the pictures he took of me in my old-fashioned bonnet and dress selling pie in the park. And then it goes on, it says, then in the midst of all of this, as strange as finding a baby on your doorstep, we found a 22-year-old Hungarian refugee on our corner doorstep, Robert. He is now becoming a part of our lives. It's hard to explain, please, words and ideas that come so natural to our life. Most of all, we are learning to appreciate and be thankful for our freedoms. Oh, the things that we take for granted. Our young, handsome refugee is teaching us much while he learns about American foods, new words, expressions, and concepts. He said trying to think of the concept of God gave him a headache. Is there a God? And who is he? Does he care and have a plan for Robert? We hope Robert finds the answer to his questions. I want to go back and tell you a little bit. So far, we have put a shop in the building, the Lawrence shop. We have a working wood shop. We have an apartment. Everything is coming together in order, and yet we have an upstairs that eventually would become 10 rooms of just shambles upstairs. And as we had to organize now the downstairs, it was time to think about the upstairs. So that is where we are when Robert arrives. And actually, how Robert arrived was he was on his motorcycle traveling too quickly. And our Sheriff Green stopped him and was going to arrest him for speeding. And he listened to his story, and he brought him to us. And we said, Robert, you can stay with us as long as you want, and in exchange, you can help us. And that was what happened. And so he began to help us with the first part of the upstairs. But before I get into that part of the story, I want to tell you a little more about, and he had never heard about God, and had no concept of God. But he did know about being enslaved in an unfree country, and he wanted to escape. And some of his family had already escaped. And he wanted so much his freedom. And he had a plan. And what the plan was, he, for months, would get on the train and go into the next country, which I believe was Yugoslavia, and he would go back and forth. Well, the first trip he took, the train people said, "Robert, you be sure and come back. A lot of young boys like you don't come back and they get shot at the border." The border between Yugoslavia and Italy, across the river. So he made that trip back and forth, and they got used to seeing him. "Hi, Robert, you going to Yugoslavia again? Hi, Robert, you coming home?" And it was back and forth. And also at the same time, when he was home, he began to swim and build up his swimming skills, because he knew if he was going to escape, he had to cross that large river into Italy. And so he really honed in on his swimming skills. And then I think he did this for 4, 5, 6 months, and then it was time. And he went in to Yugoslavia, went across the country to the other border, and there was the river. And he searched up and down the river. They had the barbed wire, the guards, the guard houses, and he kept walking up and down to see if there was some weak spot. And finally he found what he thought he wanted. And he waited until dark, and he got under the barbed wire. He got to the river. He took off his clothes. He bundled them up with his shoes and tied them as good as he could, and strapped him to his back. And he swam across the river, and he swam, and he swam, and he got into Italy. And he was free. And from Italy, I think they took him to Canada, and then from Canada he came into the States wanting to get a green card, which he really didn't get. Canada was accepting them, but the U.S. was not. But he did stay with us while he was trying for this for 6 weeks. And it was a pleasure, a pleasure to have Robert. And he helped us so much. One thing before I quit, because I'll end right here. Okay, I'll go a little bit further, I guess. The upstairs was so bad, and we had, I think it was a 1-ton truck, or 1.5 ton, something like that. And we parked it down below on the street, took out a window from the upstairs, and just threw out lath and plaster and rubble and dirt and everything we could get from that upstairs. And that's what Robert helped us with. Okay, now the other thing I was going to tell you about Robert, he helped Tom in the shop too. And he was helping us, and it was summertime, and he would go and get some pop across the street from the store. And he'd always offer me some, and I'd say, "No, thank you, that's okay, Robert." But one day, he went to do something. Oh, I hope the wind is coming up. Anyway, he went to do something, and he left his pop in the shop, and I thought, well, he's offered it to me so many times, and I am thirsty. So I went to get a drink of his pop. Was I in for a surprise? I think since he thought I never took him up on his offer, it was okay. He had it laced heavily with some kind of strong alcohol. I don't know if it was whiskey or bourbon or rye, what was in it, but I knew it wasn't just Coke. Well, Tom had to explain if he was helping him in the shop, no alcohol. If he was running that equipment, Tom didn't want any of that. He didn't want chances for Robert to get hurt. So that ended that part. But next week we'll find out more about Robert and just be so thankful for our freedom and that we have so much and we take so much for granted. So again, be thankful and be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's, for Christ's sake, forgave us. Oh, that's Ephesians 4:32. You might want to check to see if I got it all mixed up. Anyway, we can be kind to one another. And it was so nice to be able to be kind to Robert.